The series begins with the protagonist, Jihan, who won a grand prize of $31 million in the first season of Squid Game. He now plans to leave South Korea and move to the United States to reunite with his daughter. However, at the subway station, he notices a recruiter for the Squid Game trying to lure another innocent person. To everyone's surprise, Jihan decides to abandon his flight. Soon after, he receives a call warning him that he will regret not boarding the plane. Despite this, Jihan, determined, vows to track down the recruiter at all costs. He then takes a taxi to a public restroom, where he starts searching for a tracking device in his body. Eventually, he feels something in his ear. Upon investigating, he discovers a microchip. Stunned and overwhelmed, he quickly gets rid of it. In another scene, a detective named Junho gradually regains consciousness in a hospital. We learn that he had previously gone to the Squid Game island to find his missing brother. However, he was deeply shocked when his brother revealed himself as the front man, the game's director, and ultimately shot him. When Junho finally opens his eyes, he sees his mother crying out in joy. The scene then shifts to 2 years later, where Junho is working as a traffic cop. Shortly after, he goes out to eat with his boss, who asks him to return to the crime investigation department. Junho tries to explain the deadly game happening on the island, but his boss doesn't believe him and demands proof. The boss also asks about the person who shot him, but Junho says he does remember, as the attacker was his own brother. Later that night, Jihan wakes up from a nightmare and hears a noise coming from the hotel room. Looking outside, he spots his former creditor, Mr. Kim. It appears that Jihan has hired him to track down the recruiter for the deadly games. Here, Mr. Kim reveals that over the past 2 years, they've been monitoring subway stations but haven't seen anyone recruiting or behaving suspiciously. This news disappoints Jihan, but he remains confident that the recruiter will appear someday. He then hands a large amount of money to Mr. Kim and instructs him to hire more people for the mission. The next day, Mr. Kim and his right-hand man, Suk, assemble a group of men for the task. Suk orders them to look for a man in a suit who plays a game called Dokji with strangers and hands out invitation cards. Mr. Kim then orders the team to search every train station and airport in the city. He also announces a grand reward of $340,000 for anyone who succeeds in finding the recruiter. Hearing this, everyone gets excited and immediately spreads out across the city to track him down. However, even after days of searching, they find nothing useful and begin to lose hope. One evening, we see Mr. Kim and Suk at a train station, exhausted and questioning whether all their efforts are worth it. Suk wonders if the recruiter even exists, as they've been searching for him for 2 years with no success. Despite this, Mr. Kim insists that while Jihan might be crazy, he wouldn't spend millions of dollars looking for a man who doesn't exist. Suddenly, they're distracted by a sound in the distance, which shockingly turns out to be the very recruiter they've been desperately searching for. The recruiter is playing Dokji with a poor man and hands him an invitation card after the game. Mr. Kim immediately calls Jihan to inform him about the situation. Jihan, thrilled by the news, instructs them to follow the recruiter until he arrives. The recruiter then goes to a bakery and buys a large amount of bread. He also purchases 100 lottery tickets while Kim and Suk continue to tail him. Afterward, the recruiter heads to a park, approaching a homeless man sleeping on the ground. The recruiter tells the man that his life seems hopeless and without a future. He then offers him a choice, a loaf of bread or a lottery ticket. After careful consideration, the homeless man picks the lottery ticket and scratches it, only to find that he hasn't won anything. With deep regret, he watches as the recruiter walks away, taking all the food with him. The recruiter then approaches other homeless individuals and repeats the same process. Most people choose the lottery ticket, but none of them win. At the end, the recruiter stands in the middle of the park and throws all the food on the ground. A hungry man asks why he is doing this, and the recruiter replies that he gave everyone the right to choose, but they all made the wrong decision. He then stomps on the food maniacally while everyone watches in shock. In another scene, Jihan is speeding toward the park when he gets stopped by a traffic cop for overspeeding. The officer turns out to be none other than Junho, but he sends his colleague to handle the situation. Meanwhile, the recruiter gets into a taxi and Kim and Suk continue tailing him while keeping Jihan updated on the situation. During this time, Jihan hastily accepts the speeding ticket without arguing and drives off. The traffic cop mentions this to Junho, who is shocked when he sees Jihan's ID. Meanwhile, Mr. Kim and Suk finally corner the recruiter in a quiet alley and attempt to attack him. However, the recruiter easily overpowers them and takes both of them down. On the other hand, Junho enters Jihan's name into the database. Upon seeing Jihan's photo, he immediately recognizes him, as they had met before. He then writes down the car details and decides to track him down. Elsewhere, Jihan finally arrives at the alley, but can't find his men. He calls Mr. Kim several times, but the calls go unanswered. Eventually, he comes across a sharp knife and some blood stains, which frightens him. In another scene, we see Mr. Kim and Suk in a room, their hands and mouths bound. The recruiter announces that they will play a modified version of rock, paper, scissors, minus one player. The rules are that each player must choose two options with both hands, and in the final second, one option must be eliminated. The next game they will play is Russian roulette. The recruiter loads a single bullet into a 6-chamber revolver and spins the cylinder. He explains that whoever loses the rock, paper, scissors game will have to face the trigger. With 1 in 6 chances of being shot, it's a game of pure luck. Mr. Kim and his assistant, Suk, are forced to play rock, paper, scissors. However, even after several rounds, neither of them loses. The recruiter grows impatient and loads 4 more bullets into the revolver, raising the odds of death to 5 out of 6. In the final round, Suk accidentally throws only rock, while Mr. Kim plays both scissors and paper. All Mr. Kim has to do to win is choose paper, but in an act of sacrifice, he keeps both hands up, leading to his elimination. The recruiter then shoots him in the head, bringing the game to its brutal conclusion. In the next scene, Jihan returns to his hotel, where he is shocked to find the recruiter waiting for him. The recruiter once again tells Jihan that he should have boarded that plane, but Jihan, determined, says he wants to meet the organizers of the game who hired him. Jihan claims he wants to thank them because the money they gave him changed his life. The recruiter promises to pass on the message, but Jihan retorts that he is nothing more than a dog following his master's orders. These words anger the recruiter, who then suggests they play Russian roulette. He increases the risk by choosing not to spin the cylinder after each pull of the trigger, ensuring that one of them will die. Jihan, with something to prove, accepts without hesitation, and the game begins. After 4 rounds with no one being shot, the tension reaches its peak. In the 5th round, it's Jihan's turn to pull the trigger. With a 50-50 chance, the recruiter mentions that he has something in his pocket to deliver to his superiors. He also warns Jihan that if he continues down this path, he will always be seen as a loser and a lowly person. Ignoring the warning, Jihan decides to take the risk and pulls the trigger, miraculously surviving. Now it's the final round, meaning it's the recruiter's turn to face death. Jihan points out that they're in the same position, and the recruiter has a choice: either follow the rules or shoot Jihan. He also mocks the recruiter, once again calling him a dog who is nothing without his master. Infuriated by these words, the recruiter shoots himself and dies with dignity.